It's a Jim Brickman show, and you're hanging with me. It's not often that I get a chance to talk with people that I admire greatly in my profession, and today is a thrill for me because I have John Oates with me. And John, of course, I've had the good fortune of collaborating with you on a
Yes,
song.
we have.
And we had a chance to sit together at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio, to celebrate your brand new book called Change of Seasons. I am halfway through the book, so I don't know how it ends.
Well,
I don't want to spoil you. To
spoiler alert,
Yeah.
I'm still here. Okay, so let's go from there. We can work backwards.
No, but what I love about the book is that it really had an organic beginning because you were journaling, writing a lot of it. Right. I mean, that's where it started, right?
Yeah. Well, I had done a series of interviews with a fellow named Chris Epting, who became my co-writer. And Chris has published a number of books over the years, mostly history books, interestingly enough. So he kind of, as my story began to unfold, he began to see it as a story of history. It is of music history or whatever. And I mentioned to him that I had kept handwritten journals for the entire decade of the 70s. I started the day I graduated from college in the spring of 1970. And I thought to myself, I had the foresight, very rare that I have foresight, but in this case I thought, whatever I do after this is going to probably set the course for the rest of my life. I didn't know what that was going to be. I wasn't working with Daryl at the time. I was a folk singer, basically, blues singer. So I took off for Europe and started journaling. And I kept those journals for the entire decade of the 70s. And
Every day?
Yeah, I had 13 or 14 handwritten volumes.
What was it like a diary in the sense? I mean, was it
not
this is what I
some,
did today, or was it just feelings?
more of a free form diary. It wasn't, if I didn't write for a day or so, it didn't matter. It wasn't that I had to chronicle every day. But I wrote crazy things. Like I made lists of food that I ate. I described people, and of course I had this incredible adventure of going to Europe for 4 months with a backpack and a guitar. And
that you just decided to do. After college?
Yes, I had never really traveled. I grew up. I was born in New York, grew up in Pennsylvania, and I'd never gone anywhere. And my parents were immigrants, and I thought I need to see where they came from. I wanted to find out where I came from, in a sense, and that was my goal. And I did it. I went around Europe. But when I came back, I had sublet my little apartment to Daryl's sister and her boyfriend for the summer while I was gone. They didn't pay the rent. And when I came back, I went to this apartment that I assumed I had, and there was a padlock on the door and an eviction notice. And I went, okay. And I had no money. I had a backpack and a guitar, and I literally had been gone for almost 4 months. So Daryl lived on the other side of town in Philadelphia, and I walked to the other side of town. I knocked on his door, and I said, hey, man, your sister kind of screwed me here. He went, oh, no problem, just move in here. And he had this little Father, Son, and Holy Ghost house, which had 3 stories. And he and his wife were, living there. And the upper story was basically a living room with a fold-out couch, and Daryl's electric Wurlitzer piano was there. So I slept on the fold-out couch, and then he would come up every day and start tinkling around. Next thing you know, we were writing songs.
But you knew each other.
We knew each other for actually 4 years, but we were working separately. He was working in a bar band, doing studio work. I was playing in blues bands and doing folk clubs, and then we just decided to do something.
So when you moved in together,
that was basically it.
And I understand that that the mailbox was where you got.
That was
name.
Actually before that.
Oh.
That was in 1967 when we needed a place to stay, and we became roommates for one summer in Philadelphia, and it said Whole Oats on it. And then we kind of kept that name. Then we went our separate ways, and then after I needed a place to stay, we got back together.
So when you were journaling, were any of these songs, poems, was it the same as journaling, like songwriting?
Some lyrics did come out of it, but to be honest with you, I was absorbing the experience and not so much on a musical level. I was just trying to soak in the world and see what was out there. some of those songs appeared on the very first album we did called Whole Oates, which was in 1972, which a lot of people aren't even aware exists because The Abandoned Luncheonette was the second album. Most people think that was our first. But so some of those songs appeared on that album. But basically, I think once I had experienced the world in Europe and had a taste of what was out there, I think what we started doing together really was this blending of folk music, traditional stuff that I was doing, and the more urban doo-wop street corner thing that Daryl was doing, and we blended that in some unique way. And I think you begin to hear the first real synthesis of those styles on Abandoned Luncheonette.
And I think as a songwriter, when you sit down to write, sometimes you don't really know what's going to come out, right? On the other side. Were you trying to do something that was
you mean
mesh of all
trying
these
to do something good, Jim?
But
Thanks.
like when you sit down and you start to write,
Yeah.
was there any sort of thought about what you were trying to accomplish? Like, we want to write this style that meshes R&B with pop or was it just the way it came out?
The first thing we did together was we had this idea that, hey, you've got some songs, I've got some songs. You play your songs, I'll accompany you, I'll learn your songs. I'll play some songs, he'll accompany me. And we started out that way, and that became the basis for our relationship. Two individuals working together as opposed to a duet. We really never liked the concept of a duo or a duet, even though that's essentially what we are. But we're really not. We're like two band leaders in front of a band is what we are.
You're collaborators.
Yes. And so I kind of had to adapt to his style. And of course, him being a keyboard player, he had a much more sophisticated approach to, his chords and his harmony and the way he imposed his melodies over the chords in the keyboard-esque style. Whereas I was much more of a folky, rootsy kind of, traditional music player. So he had to adapt to what I was doing, and he learned from that. I introduced him to a lot of folk music and bluegrass and traditional American music. He picked up a mandolin because he wanted to be able to play that sort of thing. I had to up my game as a guitarist to play these complex chords and these, the way he was, alternating bass, substituting bass notes over certain, inversions and his unique voicings. So I had to learn to adapt this kind of very rudimentary folky technique to a much more sophisticated guitar style.
Were you really rhythmic? I mean, were you guiding the rhythm primarily?
I think I think we both did both. It was much more of like, what's that chord you're playing? It's not a regular G chord. Oh, that's a G over C. Oh, I see. So I have to do this, and I had to figure out new fingerings and things. So my guitar playing as a guitarist evolved quickly and to a much more sophisticated level. And people always say to me, you play like a piano player. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. And Daryl, of course, began to play mandolin because I used to sit on the front steps on this little street. We lived in this little hippie neighborhood. And I would try to pick up girls by, sitting there playing guitar. And he's like, his electric piano was 3 stories up there, and he wasn't exactly going to bring it down to the street. So he grabbed a mandolin, and him being a talented musician, he started just figuring stuff out. So he ended up writing songs like "When the Morning Comes," which is mandolin based, mm-hmm. because of that fact.
When you were living together writing songs, was there a moment where you thought? Because you would each had your own groups that you were leading, right? Mm-hmm. And so you were touring with them, or you were both?
No, it was all local Philadelphia stuff. It was regional.
And when you kind of found this kinship and collaborating, was it a mission to decide we're going to do this together, or did it
not at first?
Evolve?
At first, it was a alternative to the things that we were doing individually that we weren't happy about. Like he wasn't happy playing in a bar band, and he was doing a little bit of session work, backing people that weren't, that I guess he wasn't that interested in. I was just playing folk clubs and teaching guitar lessons and doing things like that. So it was really like, hey, you know what? This gives us an opportunity to try something new. And so we approached it that way as an alternative. We said, let's just break it down. This is like the most basic thing you can do. one man with his instrument and a song. And we played art galleries, we played coffee houses, and little by little we developed this following. So there was no master plan to conquer the world or become pop stars. It was really just, hey, let's see what happens. And from there, it just slowly evolved. What really happened in Philadelphia for us is we did a TV show, a telethon. There was a telethon, a 24-hour charity telethon. And I guess filling up 24 hours, they'd pretty much take anyone they could get. So word got out on the street that they needed performers. So we were like, okay. So I think we played at 11 o'clock at night. And it was a Friday night or a Saturday night. And it was not, it was regional, a big TV show in Philadelphia. We played our songs. We just set up with an electric piano and acoustic guitar, played 3 or 4 songs, and everything changed. The power of television, I guess you could say. We walked down the street the next day and everyone would stop us.
Wow.
You guys were unbelievable. We heard you. You're incredible. We were like, really? Oh, this is great. And so we became like stars in Philadelphia in this little tiny hippie universe.
Wow.
And from there, we began a quest for an album contract.
And did that take a long time?
Yeah, I detail it pretty well in the book. It took a while. We had a business guy who we were unfortunately associated with, who really kind of hurt our chances, and we had to extract ourselves from him to get a new manager. Which, of course, down the road we went from the frying pan to the fire. But that's a way more complex story that is also in the book. But it took us a while. We ended up flying to L.A. because we felt like we had exhausted our opportunities in Philadelphia and New York. And we both had expired student IDs from Temple University, and you could get student half-fare airline tickets. So we kind of handed them over to the travel desk with our thumbs over the date and managed to get $75 tickets to L.A. And we went out there not knowing anyone except a guy from Chapel Music.
Oh,
and
wow.
he took us to the Tropicana on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Oh, my gosh.
And we had no idea, and we didn't realize that you couldn't go to L.A. without a car, but we didn't have a car. So we were stuck at the Tropicana, so all we did was hang out at Duke's, the little cafe there. And then I would walk down to the International House of Pancakes, and then and that's about as far as I could get, three or four blocks before the police would stop me. So that's how it started, and we ended up meeting a guy named Earl McGrath, who was a friend of Ahmet Ertegun, who was an art dealer, but very good friends of Ahmet.
Who was the chairman of Atlantic.
That's right. And Earl had a custom label, I think as a favor to him, really, by Ahmet, on Atlantic called Clean Records. So we went to his house. He had a little cottage in West Hollywood. And we sat in his garden amid all this beautiful artwork. And we played a bunch of songs for him. And he went, are you guys... He thought we were putting him on. He thought we were... I don't know what he thought, but he said, are you guys for real? And we didn't know what he really meant. He says, why aren't you recording? And we were like, well, nobody seems to want to sign us. He goes, I'm going to sign you. And he called Ahmet. We went back to New York. We auditioned for Arif Mardin.
Wow.
And Arif said he wanted to produce us, and of course that was the golden stamp.
Yes.
And
because he produced so many. He produced a lot of your records, didn't he?
He produced the first 2. Yeah. And he was one of the greatest human beings on earth, one of the consummate producers of all time, and a mentor in so many ways. I think the things that I learned in the studio working with him are the things that I do today when I'm making my own records, 30, 40 years later. I use the same approach, same principle, even to the the subtleties of not so much the actual playing and the nuts and bolts of recording, but just the way to set up an atmosphere with people and to make people comfortable and to get the best out of the people in the room and make that moment, happen. I learned so much from him. So a very, very important part of my life.
Were you a natural performer when you started to tour and it really hit, and you started to tour all the time? Was it comfortable for you? Did you and do you like to perform? Well,
Daryl and I are exactly the same in that regard. We have both been on stage since we've been babies, literally.
Really?
I started singing as a baby, and by 5 years old, I was singing on stage. And same with him. His mother was a big band singer. She used to bring him up and he would sing, trot him out, and my mother was a stage mother. And
Was she?
she would dress me in like a red blazer and white bucks. And to this day, I can never wear red again for the rest of my life. So yeah.
So growing up, you were.
Oh, I actually, as crazy as this sounds, I actually took a part of a minstrel show in the 50s.
Really?
1950s. And I sang Al Jolson songs.
How old?
5. Yeah. And so then I started playing at 6. I played guitar at 6. So I got really tired of playing Broadway show tunes and songs from the 30s and 20s and 30s. And of course, rock and roll was just starting in the mid 50s. And so I had a guitar and I said, okay, now I can accompany myself. And I began to play simple early rock, Everly Brothers, Chuck Berry, Don Gibson, country, Conway Twitty, that kind of stuff.
Which really, if you think about that influence, it finds its way into really your whole approach.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think Everly Brothers, if you think about the even Broadway, I mean, these melody wise,
Yeah.
you're
And harmonically.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's all about, it's all about, to me, I think what makes what Daryl and I do together and separately unique is our particular choice, melodic choices over the chord structures, because we do it in a unique way that no one else does. And over the years, people have said, people don't really cover your songs. And our songs have been very, very rarely covered. We've been sampled, of course, millions of times, but actually covered very rarely because a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that unique imposition of the melody over chords the way we just happen to do it naturally. It's an odd thing.
Because it doesn't follow the melody. It's not as if you can play, like, let's say if I tried to play an instrumental of one of your songs, it would be hard because the melody is sort of riding over.
And a lot
chords.
of times, what we do is because of the doo-wop street corner, tradition. Our background vocals actually cover the actual chorus of the song.
Right.
Where the lead singing is more of a scat and kind of a free form around it, and that's a Philadelphia R&B technique as well. So.
And so when you guys, really hit it and you started selling millions of records, you're on the road. Did you have a, let's say, cliche rock and roll touring lifestyle? I know in the book you talk a little bit about that.
Well, I kind of avoided the dirt in the book. I wanted to take the high road. I thought there's too many rock memoirs that kind of get by on sensationalism, and I didn't really want to go there.
Right.
But yes.
But yeah, right. I mean, I'm
to
not
answer
asking
your question,
specifically.
Yes.
I'm saying more like, is it what you thought it would be like, and in retrospect,
let's put it this way. If the social media of today existed in the 70s, I'd be in prison. So shall we leave it at that?
But I mean, like, seriously though, who doesn't want to be a rock star? I mean, if you
Well,
really
yeah.
think about it, right?
Of course. Hey,
So if you are one,
live it.
what the heck? I mean,
Well, especially, and I have to be honest with you. Everyone probably thinks the '80s were my favorite time because we were so popular and we had all this commercial success. It was the exact opposite. I loved the '70s when we could travel in a van and we could go to these new. Every town was new. The experiences were constantly new, and you met people. We used to sleep at people's houses. We drove for miles and miles in the middle of the night, and everything was new and different and cool. So I have a very very fond memories of the 70s as the because I think and here again I think the book one of the themes that I wanted to get across was I think the story of becoming is much more interesting than the story of the victory lap.
Absolutely.
And,
because every time in the 70s, every time something happened that was that mattered was the first time it happened.
That's right.
It's not like, okay, it's the 5th time we're playing at,
Right.
the Hollywood Bowl or whatever it is, or a venue that in your hometown playing an arena or a baseball stadium. The
As
first
great
time,
as that is,
right?
It's not the same.
That's right.
That's right.
Because that, that moment only happens really once,
That's
that
right.
emotional connection.
Exactly. And I tried to tap back into that, and the memories started flooding back. In the course of writing the book, it was almost, in a way, like regressive therapy. Once the floodgates opened, and that was the good thing that my co-writer Chris Epting was so helpful with. He would refer a lot to these journals that he had. I made copies for him And he laid them out in a timeline,
Wow.
and he would say, in February of 1974, you were here and
Oh.
you did this. And then I went, oh, really? And so then I thought it was kind of a gift in a way, because there were memories that came back that I may never have thought of for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
They were there, but hidden, deep in the, in the memory bank somewhere. So this process of writing and then coloring it in, of course, he could give me the bare bones. He could say the date, the time, the place, and maybe a name, but I had to color it in, and I had to, bring it to life. And that was really, that was the most interesting process of the writing of the book.
Do you feel like when that music is the love of your life, I mean, it comes before everything, or at least used to come before everything?
Yeah, it's ebbed and flowed in my life. It's always been so much a part of my life. In a way, I think I've done myself a disservice by taking it for granted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I say in the book, and I say it, kind of tongue in cheek, but it's actually true. I say I don't really care about being famous because I've always been famous, because I was the oldest male grandson in an Italian family. So I was always put up
treated
front.
Like the king.
He was the boy king. And so even in a small world of the family, which then became a bigger world of a small town and the bigger world of a city, I have always been, kind of famous. So I've taken it for granted in a way. And in some ways, it caused me not to push myself hard enough, because it was always kind of easy for me in a way. Not the success wasn't easy, but the ability to do what I do has always been natural to me. Mm-hmm. So I think if I would have worked a little harder, I could have been a lot better.
So when you give advice to people, when you're doing songwriting, seminars, or you're advocating for somebody else, I think there's this point after you have a lot of success and yet you continue to want to do so many things. When you do look back on it, and you give others advice, wise, sage advice from somebody who's been, through it all, would you say that the theme of the book is the idea that the journey is really the part of it that's the
absolutely
most satisfying?
It is. It's and being able to be aware enough and to be able to stop and try to appreciate it while it's happening. I think too many times, there's so many things that I just let slide by, assuming that, well, it's going to happen again, or, this is not so meaningful, and realize maybe I didn't absorb it the way I should. And now being older, and certainly as, in terms of advice, I think of it much more often. Even on stage, when I'm on stage right now with Daryl on this tour, I look around at, like, for instance, our sax player, Charlie, who's been with us since 1975.
Wow.
And and not to be morbid or anything, but I think someday he's not going to be here.
Right.
And I try to really absorb the moments and understand that it's happening, and it may never be the same again. Mm-hmm. And this is, and as you get older, it's kind of a house of cards you're playing with in a way. You pull one from the bottom, and maybe the whole thing collapses, and you never know how that's going to manifest itself. So,
do you think that this could have happened if you'd started now the way music is? Do you feel like the same kind of thing could have happened?
I don't know. I can't say, because I came up during a time, I'm a product of my era. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, the style of everything that I do has to do with everything that came before it. So if I came up now, of course, I'd be a kid who, where it embraces technology.
Right.
I'd probably be a normal kid.
The influence
so
would
who
be
knows
different.
what I would be doing,
Mm-hmm.
But so I really can't. I don't think I can answer that.
It's the Jim Brickman Show, and we are talking with John Oates' brand new memoir. Love that word. Is Change of Seasons. It's really, really good, whether you're a musician or whether you're just fascinated by life stories, and it's really great. Check it out. We'll put up some of the excerpts at jimbrickman.com and leave you. We'll share this interview too, the entire interview, on our website, jimbrickman.com. And best of luck. I want to leave with just one real quick thought, and that is that, when we first saw each other today, and you were asking me if I had seen the show, what struck me was that you were curious about whether I liked the show or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for people listening to know that many of us who do this, do it because we do love it, but we're always in search of, making sure that people are happy with
That's
what
right.
we do, and saying, is what I did, pleasing to you?
Yeah.
And was it good? No matter how successful you are, right?
It's beyond just reaffirming things for yourself. It's you want to bring your A game, and of course I asked you because you're a musician. I want a musician's opinion. I see lots of people just dancing and clapping. They all seem happy. That's fine, but it's always good to know from a musician's point of view whether you feel like you're delivering. It's very important to me anyway.
Respect from your peers.
There you go.
The wonderful John Oates. So happy to see you in person and not over Skype.
Much better. Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you for being here.
Thank you.